Reverend Sayge Whitesong is a non-sectarian minister and shamanic practitioner who has been described as a peacemaker, a healer, a light worker, and a spiritual teacher. Reverend Sayge teaches Qigong and is the author of 3 books, The Human Experiment, Messages from Home, and the Zoltak Journal. But Reverend Sayge didn't come to this new life easily. A traumatic event ultimately destroyed the life he knew and loved. His new life was born out of the ashes of his former life. Okay, you had a very traumatic event that actually changed your life in many ways. Can you tell us what happened and how you dealt with it?
Yes, absolutely. I've spent all my life in the field of law enforcement, 20 years as a matter of fact. And that encompassed both the public and the private sectors of policing and security. And having said that, this occurred while working in the private sector of protection. And it all occurred as a result of a violent arrest that I was involved in while trying to subdue a man who had been high on drugs and alcohol, and so was super strong at the time. And it was probably the most violent encounter of my entire career of 20 years. And it was a life-altering encounter as well. And so as a result of this violent encounter with this 7-time criminal offender, I developed something called post-traumatic stress disorder. I like to call it the monster, because it truly is a monster that is left unchecked. And when it's left unchecked, it continues to grow. And that's what happened to me. And after the violent arrest, we did take the guy into custody at the time. But the injuries that weren't physical injuries, because I didn't suffer any physical injuries during this violent encounter, but the mental health injuries that I suffered were enormous. And it was slow to manifest as well, and that's one of the things with post-traumatic stress disorder, is it kind of creeps up on you. And so for about 3 or 4 months after the event that caused post-traumatic stress, the symptoms began to grow inside me. And those symptoms were symptoms of extreme anger, symptoms of emotions that were out of control, hallucinations, both visual hallucinations and auditory hallucinations. I remember that in the nights after that, I'd be out working after the initial event. I went back to work, and the nights that I went out working, I would be driving along and I would see people step out from the sidewalk onto the roadway, and in my car I would hit those people. And I remember jumping out and checking all around underneath my car, and there was no one there. And of course you're in a panic because you believe you've ran somebody over. When I got home after night shift, I would hear voices calling my name, and there was no one there. And that was a big part of the auditory hallucinations that can happen when you have post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, I left those things unchecked. I thought they were pretty strange. I didn't know what was happening. But left unchecked, they began to grow and manifest into greater things. And the stress that your body would feel just by doing normal everyday things. For instance, if you misplace something in the house, you would go on this rampage, this anger-filled rampage around your house until you found it, which was totally unlike me. I'm a pretty calm, docile person and peaceful person, but I would smash things in order to find what it was I needed. If it was a razor that I had laid in a different spot, or my wife had moved it. And this anger was uncontrollable. I could not control that. Some of the other symptoms that began to happen were body paralysis. So I would be driving along in my car and I would stop at a red light. When the light turned green, my body would suddenly not be able to grip the wheel of the car. My legs wouldn't be able to step on the gas. My body couldn't move. My mind was functional, but the rest of me couldn't function. That's pretty scary stuff.
It would be.
And huge memory lapses. Again, you're out in your car, you're running errands that you've set in place, and all of a sudden I would go into a full panic because I would forget where I lived. I would forget my wife's name and phone number, and I didn't know how to access my cell phone in order to retrieve that information. And I remember I would somehow scroll through to find a name that resembled something familiar to me. And all of the names in my phone were obviously friends and family, and I would just dial somebody as best I could and ask who my wife was and where I lived. You can imagine being one of my friends receiving a phone call like that, how ludicrous that would actually seem, not knowing that I was sick.
Yeah.
That's pretty and then I would cry. I mean, that's pretty tough stuff. And then when I did recall after 20 minutes, when I began to recall things, you know, through a friend's help, I would pull over on the side of the road and sob uncontrollably. And that's the other side of this thing. The other side of the anger, of course, is extreme, you know, the extreme emotion of breaking down and crying and screaming at the top of your lungs because you don't know what's happening to you. It became so bad, in fact, that you know, I needed to get help, and I didn't get help. And it took my wife, who unfortunately suffered terribly watching me suffer. She suffered, and I wasn't pleasant with my wife. Not physically not pleasant, but not verbally pleasant with her. And I would say things that I wouldn't normally say, and that was tough on her. And so it got to a point she, God bless her, stuck with me as long as she could. And after almost a year of languishing in whatever was going on, she decided that she needed to go stay with her mom. And that was my trigger to get help. And she said, when you get help for whatever's happening, I'll come back. And that was the time that I went to the doctor. And the doctor said, you're suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. These are classic symptoms. And that was my first time ever hearing this term as it related to me and not some war vet. I didn't know that ordinary everyday people could get this. Not alone, really, I didn't understand its intricacies. And so I embarked on a long period of healing. I believe it was, if I can recall, almost a year of healing, where I was referred to a trauma specialist. And this trauma specialist would use a cutting-edge treatment called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. That's what it stands for. And so through this, I had to recall the event, which was the arrest situation that had caused all this. I had to retrieve this violent encounter. And I had to relive it over and over and over and over again as I went through this EMDR treatment. And the treatment is designed to allow you to process the event, the stuck event, because the event is stuck and it plays like a movie in your subconscious. And so you have to retell the story verbally. All the while you have these headphones on that have alternating tones, and these alternating tones are designed to break down the memory itself, allow it to process through the brain as it should have when it first happened. You know, in the moments after the event, it should have processed properly, but it didn't. It allows it to become, and I'm simplifying this, of course, unstuck. I will say that wasn't very easy at all, because having to relive that fight, that violent encounter, brought back some emotions and brought up emotions. That was hard. That was hard on my body, because sometimes I would leave those sessions and it takes sometimes several sessions, which it did for me, of EMDR to even allow me to talk about the incident, because I couldn't even talk about the incident like I'm talking to you now without crying and sobbing.
But what do you think was so difficult for you to accept? Like, what was the worst part of that whole experience that created the trauma, or at least part of it?
That I had to hurt another human being.
Okay.
In the course of my duties. And because I had a service dog, you know, this service dog that was trained to protect me, where I encountered somebody like this, I never had to use my dog, this trained service animal. And the fact that we had to apply force, which I hadn't really had to do to the degree that I had to do it in 20 years,
And did you feel like out of integrity in having to do that, or it wasn't you? Or?
It just wasn't me. If I can reflect back on it, to say if you had to talk to me back then, I would have told you I was prepared to do that. Mm-hmm. Not realizing what happens when that happens, when you have to actually use higher levels of force than are normal to subdue a suspect. And what can happen. And many times a police officer, after he shoots somebody, will have a hard time with having to shoot somebody, although he's trained to do so. Mm-hmm. And I trained over and over and over and over for such situations that I was in. And for this situation in particular. But nothing truly prepares you for the reality of it. Mm-hmm. Of the violence that had to take place against me and against him. Mm-hmm. And I learned something very valuable, that I'm not a violent man.
And how often did you have to go for the EMDR treatments?
Once a week. Okay. Once a week I had to go for a year.
Okay, yeah.
And each time we would explore different aspects of that situation. So where I would come, say you were the therapist, where I would come one day, today this aspect would be bothering me. This frame of that situation, of the picture of that event, that snapshot would be bothering me today. Another aspect of it would bother me next week. And so every little aspect had to be dealt with using EMDR. And so that fight had to be relived. And in doing so, there were times when I remember that I would have to hold my hands on the headphones and I would scream, please, no, I don't want to relive this again. But you had to, in order for your body to heal, in order for your mind to process this, in order for those tones, those alternating tones that break down that memory, in order for them to process well, you had to relive it as part of the therapy. And what I also found is this, which is fascinating to me. I suffered sexual abuse as a child from my brother. And all of a sudden we found ourselves talking about that in the latter parts of the therapy. And so what I learned was this, is that there was a lifetime of accumulation of traumatic events, which everybody has in their own way. And this violent encounter with this man was the fuse, was the match and the fuse that lit the bomb of everything that happened previously.
Okay.
So post-traumatic stress disorder can affect somebody not only if they're involved in a violent encounter in the middle of the night as I was, but it can happen to anybody based on one thing happening in your life that caused you such an amount of stress, an acute amount of stress they call it, and that will be the match that lights the bomb, and everything else that happened that you consider traumatic in your life will come racing to the surface. Anybody can get this. Mm-hmm. Anybody can get this. Yeah. And it doesn't even have to be, it can be what you consider stressful. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be anything dramatic. And when I was finally, quote unquote, cured, I was free. I could talk about it. I had no more memory lapses. I was free of the monster, or so I thought. A large period of time went by, and then one day I was reminded of those events, and they're called triggers. This is 6 years later, 7 years later. I was reminded by an encounter with somebody I've had from my policing days. And the brain, although I wasn't in the public policing capacity when this happened, I met my old patrol partner. Well, that, the brain says, is that uniform. And that uniform is the event. And in milliseconds, my mind made a connection and I had a flashback. And so that when I left talking this wonderful conversation with an old friend, I was feeling out of sorts inside that day, I remember. And I remember calling my wife and saying, oh, I ran into so-and-so. And she had a special key, my wife. She says, are you okay? That's what I call the key. I said, yeah, I'm fine, absolutely. Yeah, it was interesting. I feel a bit funny, but not sure really why. Within an hour, I was suicidal. Oh my goodness. And my body was going into paralysis. And I was re-experiencing all of those things that I had experienced when I had full-blown PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I remember crossing over a skyway, the Burlington Skyway, that night, and I was screaming and crying 7 years later. And I wanted to stop my car and get out and jump off the bridge.
The feeling that you want to kill yourself, is it to escape the terrible feelings that you're feeling, or what is the suicidal component?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
The
Because
pain.
I hear so many Iraq veterans come back and they kill themselves, and you think, oh my goodness, you survived the war and then you come back and you kill yourself. So
yeah, I think if I'm to examine it, just sitting here talking with you, if I'm to examine this, it is maybe perhaps to escape the pain. And what's happening is you think you're done, and all of a sudden you're not done, and the body's reacting again inside, and there's so much going on in the head at that moment that you're re-experiencing things again, and your body's back into that fight, all from talking and having a pleasant conversation with someone from the past that wore a uniform. It only takes something very minute. And that sent me on a roller coaster that I continue on today. That was back in January. And we're now almost a year later, and I find myself, after saying goodbye to the trauma therapist 7 years ago, I'm finding I'm back in her office now. And we're dealing now with triggers that are happening. And now it's no longer called post-traumatic stress disorder, but it's called post-traumatic stress.
And will you do the same thing then, go back on a weekly basis or whenever you can and have the EMDR?
Yes, exactly. Now EMDR saved my life. It really did. I'm not mentioning this to say that the EMDR did not work. It did work. Mm-hmm. Worked beautifully. Okay. But it wasn't all encompassing. Who could ever foresee triggers that would come up later on down the road? We worked on what was bothering me at the time. We could never have anticipated this happening. I discovered something called Qigong. And Qigong is the ability to have what they call Qi energy, which is Chinese medicine. Use Qi to allow the energy to free flow through your body and to manage the energy of your body by will and desire. And so I became a teacher of this Qigong because it felt so good. And it's much like Tai Chi in its very slow-moving way. And so this heals. Once the Qi flows, as it should in your body, you heal yourself. They call it medicine in motion because you're able to heal yourself from the inside out by using the Qi and working with it. I don't get sick anymore. I don't get common colds and flus. My family, my children come home. I've got 4 boys, 4 lovely boys. They all come home with all the colds and flus, and everybody in the house gets sick but me. And I believe that's as a direct result of the healing through Qigong that I do, and through working with the energies of the land and trees. And so now I'm in balance. Now I'm living in balance. Okay. Am I completed my healing journey? I'm not. Mm-hmm. I'm not. I mean, well, this is seen by this reoccurrence of post-traumatic stress now. This is an ongoing process, and you know, yeah, I mean, are there still triggers? I'm told there'll be triggers the rest of my life, that I have to be hyper aware of what goes on around me and who I talk to and what I talk about, because it could ignite a trigger which will take me back to that time. And my wife and I recently saw a movie. We were on a date night, which we love to do when we get the chance. And we went and saw a movie, and the movie had a trigger in it. That trigger incapacitated me to the point where she had to carry me out of the theater because I couldn't feel my legs. And when I have one of those episodes, it takes me out for about 3 or 4 days. Wow. I'm exhausted. Emotionally, mentally, physically exhausted after one trigger. What is this all helping me to do? And I believe it's helping me to help others, because I'll meet somebody, and I meet people. I have clients now that come to me with different things, and I understand mental illness more than I ever have. And so now I start them on the journey that I was taken on, through going back to basics and living your life in a very simplistic way. I was a big TV watcher. I was a big movie goer. Okay. But as a result of all of this, it's made, I've had to balance my life. I've had to become extra peaceful. I can't watch violence, which is interesting. I used to love watching all these cops and robbers shows, and but as a result of post-traumatic stress disorder, I cannot watch any kind of violence. If someone raises their voice or I see somebody yelling at somebody in the parking lot, I have to center myself in such a way that I'm not triggered by the energy of that. So I've had to become an extra peaceful, balanced person. I've had to control what controls me. So I can't watch TV like I used to. I can't go to the movies like I used to. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I've returned to a more simple form of living. And that's what I teach my clients.
And do you think that one day you will be able to feel like you're fully healed from that event?
That's a tough question. I'll have to say that I think this is going to be something that I will work with the rest of my life. Not suffer from, work with. I can't articulate to you how painful it is, but the end result was this. My therapist said to me, you can never go back to that field of work, ever. Because your body will remember the trauma and you'll have flashbacks. So you have to find a new line of work. But there was something that the therapist did in the course of our time together that was not part of the quote-unquote official therapy. And she started to talk about things called chakras and energy, this invisible energy. And she said, I'm going to show you some exercises that will help ground you. All this language was very foreign to me. I thought she was a kook. You know, I thought, here I am paying $80 an hour to talk about something really stupid and things that I would arrest people for being mentally ill. You know, I didn't have any idea. But really, little did I know is that she was my first doorway to a whole other world that I'm now fully engrossed in this the spirit world. She was the first one to introduce me. And when she taught me about chakras and working with this invisible energy that I didn't understand, and these exercises she showed me, like fluffing my aura and protecting myself with this energy, this invisible energy, I actually felt better when I left her office having done these exercises that she showed me before we did the EMDR and then after. And she would check my energy levels by having me squeeze my fingers together and then pull on these fingers. And if the fingers came apart, she would do this crazy exercise with me, and then she'd say, you know, try to resist me opening your fingers. And she would do this, and my fingers wouldn't open. They were like vice grips. I thought, that's interesting. And so that was really my first introduction to this world of energy that we're in. When I finished my therapy with her, I was cured. And off I went into the world, and I thanked her, and I thought, what am I going to do with my life now? And so what I did with my life was sat at home, and the bills piled up. My wife said, listen, you know, you have to do something. You have to make money. We're drowning. We were living in a big house. We had to move out of it. We had to return all of our vehicles. We lost everything. Our company folded, right? Because I couldn't go back to that work.
Yeah.
So our company went bankrupt. And so I was dealing with the ego part of me as well, having lost everything, this successful company, over one incident.
And what you loved, what you said.
What I love. What am I going to do now, really? And I had a friend that said to me, we were walking through a carnival one summer, and as families do, and his family and my family went to this carnival, and he saw a circus clown, and he said, you could do that. And I said, a clown? He said, you could do that, yes. He says, listen, it's very easy, and I knew nothing about that. But he put a bug in me, and I found myself ordering a costume, a clown costume. He said, that's work you could do and make money at. And all you got to do is you got to know very little magic, make some balloons, make people happy. Well, I tried it. And that went on for 6 years.
Good for you.
All of a sudden I was a clown traveling across the province, making people happy. Well, I met this woman in my travels, and she said to me, this woman who was a doctor of hypnotherapy, she said, I just happened to be having tea with her one day, a friend of a friend, during the midst of me doing this clown work. And she says, you know, you're highly intuitive. She says, I'm empathic, you're highly intuitive. Did you know that? You have psychic abilities. And I said, oh, that's wonderful. I got you, that's great. Listen, it's getting late. And so she said, no, really. And so she was able to demonstrate to me by putting her earring in my hand. She says, I want you to recall images of you know, whatever, I want you to call in images that you feel coming off my earring. So I remember holding her earring in my hand, and all of a sudden images started to appear, and she was able to show me pictures from her life that validated what was coming out of my mouth, all from holding her earring. I thought, well, isn't that interesting? That's fascinating. So I ended up staying with her, studying with her for a year. And the whole time my wife's going, this is all well and good, but you're crazy. Now you're psychic, you're a psychic clown. I said, listen, this is amazing stuff. I'm actually, you know, getting stuff that's accurate. And eventually this woman turned me over to another teacher. And I worked with him for a year, and he honed my skill of connecting to the spirit world. And gradually the clowning got less and less, and I began to go out into the community doing this psychic work. And I was really quite good at it, and you know, people were coming to see me, and the accuracy of what I was doing was quite high.
So you were giving readings?
I was doing readings, yeah, in front of groups of people, you know, in the community, and then private readings as well. This was all very foreign, you know. And I began to grow my hair long, and I began to grow my beard in, and this had an impact. And then I met a lady who became my shamanic teacher, my shaman teacher. And I had no idea what shamanism was, and as I know now, shamanism is really, it's a very earth-based spiritual practice that that a shaman is in a tribe, or in native terms, it's the medicine man of the tribe. It's the one people go to talk to spirit, to get messages. If they have health issues, if they want to know, you know, things going on in their life, they go to the shaman of the tribe, of the community, and the shaman then goes to the spirit world and brings back information. But the shaman also works with the plants and the animals, and they talk, and plants and animals talk. And so I began to go through this transformation from this law enforcement guy suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder to this healed person with these abilities that I didn't know I had. The more you do this work, the more it opens you up. And the more it opens you up, the more for me I began to heal inside. Of course, my wife wasn't on board with this, right? She said, this is really weird. Like, I don't know what you're into here. It's like a cult. And I said, well, it's not. This is good work. I'm helping people. And it's giving me a purpose. And the spirit world is telling me this is what I'm meant to do. I'm being called to this work. This work calls to me. From the trauma and the fire and the ashes of my former life, this work has placed itself before me. Not by accident. I mean, if you look at the breadcrumbs that were laid, I now travel across Canada and the United States, helping people through my spirit work, through shamanic counseling of people. I'm helping them work out their life's issues. And so I created this company called Giant Life Solutions. And it's a great name because I felt that the healers that helped me heal, i.e. the trauma therapist that helped me, and all the people that helped me as I emerged from this fire that was my life before, I wanted to repay that. I wanted to repay them by helping others. And so that's the work I'm doing today. And I'll say to you that I've read up plenty now and see that there are plenty of case studies where people who have had severe trauma in their lives end up having quote-unquote psychic abilities. The trauma ignites and opens you up. And so my whole life now is dedicated to helping people heal. And what a great mission this is for me. And so as I look back on my former life, I can't believe that that's what I can't believe I was in law enforcement. I can't believe that that was my life, and that's all I thought I would do. So it's been an absolute flip of the coin. My wife jokes. She says, I've been married to many men. Yeah.
Now, can you say that the worst thing that ever happened to you is you can now see it was the best thing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And in fact, I hated that guy that started all this, the guy that I tried to arrest that night. I hated him when I first, many years ago, I hated him. If I saw him today, I would hug him and I would thank him. And as it turns out, that guy in the middle of the night, turned out he's a distant cousin of my wife.
Wow.
How's that for synchronicities?
Mm-hmm.
So you see, Spirit was already at work.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to meet that guy in order to get me out of the field that I loved. And as my wife tells it, that door needed to be slammed shut so that I couldn't get back into it.
Mm-hmm.
In order to push me into the spirit work that I'm doing now. Now, on top of all of this, I will tell you that I've kept one thing from those days of clowning. I kept one aspect of myself that I continue to do today, and that is I'm a Santa Claus.
Okay.
I'm a professional Santa, and so every year in about October, I stop doing the readings for people, and I don this red suit, and I go out into the community till the end of December, and sometimes into January.
Well, we're just 1 week away from Christmas today. It's December 18th, 2012. Yes. And I love it that you do that, because I know a lot of people who have disappointment about Christmas. They get depressed, or they feel lonely. There's a lot of negative energy surrounding Christmas. Particularly, I know for myself as a child, I was so disappointed when I found out my parents had been lying to me, and actually all the adults had been lying to me, and the whole sort of, if you don't clean up your room, Santa won't come, and all that manipulation and all that. So for you to take all that on and go out there with the spirit of Christmas, as purely as you can gather it, I think that's just fantastic. It's beautiful.
Thank you. And I'll tell you that it is healing in itself, because when you put on that red suit, there's a healing that goes on, that you're able to go to people as this mythical figure of Santa Claus, and you're able to do healing work with people. And what happens is the red suit allows strangers to approach strangers. Mm-hmm. And so I'm a Santa known for giving hugs. And when you come up to me, I outstretch my arms and I hug you. Whether you're an adult or a child, I hug you and I tell you I love you, because that's what I truly do. I love people, and I think not enough people hear I love you. So the red suit, if I was to go out like this and walk up hugging people in the street and saying I love you, I would. I would, yes, definitely. The red suit is amazing in that it receives people. The suit receives people, mm-hmm. and allows people to approach me. And I get more adults that come up to me with ailments, which I found in the past couple of years is fascinating. They'll come up with physical ailments and say, Santa, can you heal me? Now, they don't know the work that I do. That's the neat thing about it. Santa, can you heal my back? Can you heal my legs? People in wheelchairs will come up and ask for healing. Also, they'll ask for healing for loved ones who are sick. And people come up for healings. And again, they have no idea what I do, but that's the power of the Spirit working through me. So it's not about me. It's not about me. I'm not doing the healing. Mm-hmm. Spirit's working through me, and it's healing people. And through that, it's healing myself. And other days when I've got tears that sit at the back because I'm dealing with the effects of post-traumatic stress while I'm doing this work, absolutely. But I'm able to set that aside as I do this really important work that Santa Claus does. And through this, I'm able to restore perhaps hope and happiness to their lives to some degree. And at the same time, Santa's doing two things, because he's healing me. When I have that red suit on and I'm focused elsewhere, I'm healing too.
There's a website that's about you. It's
Yes.
called www.revsayge.com.
Yes.
REVSAYGE.com. And I understand it's not your website, but it's somebody else has started that for you. Is that correct?
No, it is my website.
Oh, it is
my website. Yeah, okay. Yeah. It's revsage.com. I have my site that's dedicated to spirit work, and that's zoltach.com, and that talks about my work. But somebody said to me, "What about you? We want to know about you, the man that does this work. And we want to help people get to know you." And so I created reverendsayge.com or revsage.com in an effort to tell people about me personally and who I am.
Okay, because I found on there something, I'm paraphrasing, but something about you that said you're a man who walks a path of peace, love, and service to others.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
That's
Yes, and that's what I've dedicated my life to,
Okay.
is doing that work. And so when I travel from community to community to community, I do so without the Santa suit on. I'm saying in my regular other off-season work, I'm doing the shamanism work, the shamanic counseling work, and I go to communities and I meet with people privately, and when I'm not doing readings, I'm sitting with them and helping them work through their life's problems and teaching them about the lessons that come out of trauma in their own lives or the hardships of their own lives. And I reframe their experiences so that they can see it from my point of view, that this isn't being done to them, it's being done for them, what's happening in their lives. They don't have to suffer, but yet they can look at it, what's happening to them, with a sense of wonderment.
Okay.
Because there's lessons, there's messages within what's happening to them, what they call terrible things, I consider great lessons, and we don't have to look at it in a negative sense. I believe Spirit is working through us all the time, helping us to understand life.
So ultimately, it's for their own good.
Yes.
Even though they can't see that right now.
That's correct. So I help them see that.
Okay.
Through my work.
Okay. We just have a few minutes left. Is there anything else that you'd like for people to know?
I'd like people to know that you're not alone, and to suffer alone. There's an old shamanic saying, and that is, we cannot heal in silence. And so I say to you, if you feel like you're suffering, you need to go out and communicate that to somebody whom can help you. And there's no shame in that, right? There's no shame in that. And there are people out there that can help you. So don't suffer in silence, because we can't heal in silence. We can only heal when we talk and communicate with people who can help us. And sometimes our friends aren't those people. Because our friends go... Or family. Because those are the people that pat you on the shoulder and say, it's going to be okay. But maybe you need to talk to somebody who has an objective opinion, who can see the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. And so if you go to see a shaman like myself, or you go and see a therapist. So my message is this: there's lots going on in your life. And maybe my story will make you realize that the world's not coming down around you. The world's really teaching you. So get help. Don't suffer in silence. Great. That's my message.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for sharing your story with us today.
You're very welcome. I'm honored and pleasured. And Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you.
Thank you.